Our Saturday keynote speaker today is our international keynote speaker. And it is Dr. Kapil Kapoor, who, for most of the scholars here, needs no introduction, but I will introduce him anyway. Dr. Kapoor is former professor of English, concurrent professor and rector, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, retired. He was the editor-in-chief of the Indian Heritage Research Foundation, USA, which sponsored the 11-volume, now world-famous, Encyclopedia of Hinduism, published in 2012, and chief editor in the Sahitya Academy-sponsored Encyclopedia of Indian Poetics as well. He was visiting professor at the Irish Academy of Cultural Heritages, University of Ulster, UK, Birla Foundation Fellow, and a Fellow, Punjabi University, Patiala. He was a member of the governing body of the Indian Institute of Advanced Study, Shimla, and governing body of the Indian Council of Philosophical Research. Currently, he is a member of the Sanchi University Mentor Group, and he's doing some remarkable work with that, of the Sanchi University of Buddhist and Indic Studies to be established at Sanchi, Madhya Pradesh. He has also published Dimensions of Panini Grammar, Indian Grammatical System and Text, Interpretation, the Indian Tradition, as well as Indian Knowledge Systems in 2005. All of these qualifications and achievements don't speak to most of our experience of the man, which far exceeds anything that I could possibly read. And the only way that you could experience that is to hear him yourself. Kapil ji, please.
Rita ji, thank you so much for having asked me to come. And I'm also grateful to Shande ji. I think he has avoided listening to me, quite justifiably. And the DCF Foundation, of course, and the University of Southern California. Rita ji, I thank you once again for such kind words of praise. And that creates a risky situation for me, because when there is such praise, I think one should remain silent, because if one opens one's mouth, one exposes oneself. I have learned a lot in the last 1.5 years, last 1.5 days here. Listened to so many scholars who are so much deeply inside Vivekanandaji's work, and from different dimensions and different aspects of his personality and his work and his contribution. I don't think I have that kind of inwardness with Vivekanandaji. I was asking myself when Rita ji had asked me I had sent an abstract also, de-subjugating the vocabulary and acting as intellectual catalyst. I asked myself, yesterday in fact, after listening to so many scholars, that such a phenomenon as Vivekananda, where did he come from? Did he come in a vacuum? Suddenly you have him? Or was it an inspired response to the Christian challenge to Hinduism, his faith? A little reflection showed me that it's not so. In fact, Vivekanandaji is in a tradition in this country. I'm in this country, I'm in India. I always think I'm still in India. he is in a hoary, continuous tradition in India of great minds who come off and on to meet the challenges that are offered to dharma. In one word, dharma. By that I mean the whole belief system, practices of the Hindu society. Again and again, we have this phenomenon. Of course, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna promises धर्म संस्थापनार्थ है. मैं बार बार आता हूँ, आई संभवामि युगे युगे. In that tradition, I'll come to that tradition in a little while. When I look at Vivekanandaji's writings, his vocabulary, I ask myself, such a tremendously intelligent man, why does he, without asking questions, employ the same terminology, God, religion, terms which do not appropriately designate what our modes of thinking are? He uses the same terminology, doesn't interrogate the terminology. And I thought that it's because he is in argument, he is in disputation with those who do not appreciate, to put it very mildly, do not appreciate some of the fundamental practices or tenets of Hinduism. And what has added to the all-pervading demoralization of the Hindu society at that time. Historically, if we look at it, you see, with the defeat of the Sikhs, the defeat of the Marathas, the defeat of the Sikhs, failure of 1857, then founding of the universities, a completely demoralized society, very demoralized. And on top of all of that experience, you have a very strong dominating system, questioning the very fundamentals of your belief. I have particularly in mind, you see, two things, that the Hindu society is a society in darkness, and it is full of injustice to women, and it has such irrational practices as idol worship. So the servility and the demoralization, in that, he contests the position, and since he is contesting the position, and he is in disputation with them, he uses their vocabulary. If he were to start insisting on, then I'm sorry, God with capital G doesn't capture Ishwar, Paramatma, Bhagwan, Brahman. It doesn't capture all that. The with capital G. I will not use that word, I'll use another. So that people started doing much later, when there was some understanding or appreciation of the Hindu positions. So he uses their vocabulary. It's understandable why he uses their vocabulary, because it is the God with a capital G which is the stick with which the Hindu society is beaten. You see that monotheistic, formless, one God. Now that becomes the fountain, that becomes the source of both proselytization, because not following this is being in darkness, and it also becomes the fountain of the questioning of idol worship, because so many gods and it is all stone or wood or something, so you're worshipping stone and wood. Because that is the source from which all the critique springs. He sticks to that word, and then he doesn't go into the etymology, or he doesn't go into the semantics of that term, but he starts setting forth. He assumes, okay, let me use the same word for our conception, and then let me see. Now, in that disputation, what he is actually doing is, and we had many very learned papers about that. When he talks comparatively about other systems, he's inclusive or exclusive or pluralistic, or I don't think those things entered his mind at all. I have very clear notion that he knew what he was doing. He was contesting that position, and he wanted to show that the labels don't fit. The way kinds of labels that are being stuck on the Hindu society don't fit. And because he is in disputation, he is in fact trying to, he is a defender. He is defender. He defends. He is defending the Hindu positions. And that brings me to the second point. In Atharva Veda, Bhumi Sukta, there is a prayer. It's a very ancient prayer, Atharva Veda. The prayer is, O Mother Earth, destroy those who want to subdue my Rashtra by Shastra and Shastra, and or Shastra. This is very important. This is a long ancient prayer. Destroy those who want to subdue my Rashtra by Shastra or Shastra. By 19th century, India had been subjugated by both Shastra and Shastra. It was a totally subjugated India. 800 years of Muslim rule, defeat after defeat in the battlefields, till you reach a particular position with the Marathas, defeat after defeat, and all major symbols of Hindu society destroyed one after the other. Telltale helplessness of the people, followed by the British rule, where the Shastra, the English language, the English education took over. And even men like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, who were scholars of Sanskrit, but because they were employees of the British company, writing to the governor that Sanskrit has no knowledge, so please give us English education. We are all familiar in the Anglicist versus Orientalist controversy. More Englishmen were for the Orientalist system, but Indians were for the Anglicist system. And so Shastra subjugated. First Shastra subjugated, because during the Muslim period, India's learning for some years was marginalized, maybe suppressed a little, but the basic character of India's knowledge society did not change. It did not change. But with the British, I'm sure some of us have heard about Adams' report and Macaulay's report. Adams, who was asked to study the school education in Bengal, his report said, they have a wonderful system. Every village has a school. And in that school, everybody goes. Muslim, Brahmin, scheduled caste, everybody goes there. And only 12% of the teachers in villages are Brahmins. Now, Adams' report was bypassed. But that's and Macaulay's education. So, Shastra. Take one example of Shastra, subjugation by Shastra. 19th century liberalism came to Bengal, came to India. And it is liberalism, the liberal thinking, which focuses on the ills of the Hindu society. For good reason. I'm not saying that the critique was all wrong. For good reason. It foregrounded the ills of the Hindu society. Inequality among people, ill-treatment of inequality among people, inequality among castes, inequality with women, and so on. And then specific malpractices, specific problems such as young widows, large number of young widows in Bengal, and no remarriage, and then sati, infanticide of girls. These women-related issues which are very, very widespread in Bengal. There was a context, there was a reason. The reason was that it is recorded that the zamindars, the landlords of Bengal, strong landlords, were mostly Muslims. And when the girls used to come to the age of puberty, they would be abducted. So the Hindu poor farmers, they decided to, the moment the girl was mature, they'll marry off the girl to a Hindu Kuleen Jamidar. It is a Kuleen Vivaha Vyavastha. So a Jamidar, Hindu Jamidar, landlord, 65, 69, 70, he will have 20 wives of age 9 to 12, 9 to 13, 9 to 14. And then, of course, he would die, and you had that many widows. Now, when those girls became widows, at that time there was no practice of remarriage. Though some of them will be taken care of by the family, others will be exploited, and then the other ills of the society, sati and others. So I'm only telling the background. But that was there, and it was foregrounded. And of course, idol worship and so on. Now this Shastra, liberalism, it really put the Hindu thinking mind on the defensive. They had to be on the defensive. But there was a response. There was a response, and it was a calibrated response. For example, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, he completely dismissed the traditional Hindu culture. And he also dismissed the possibility of reforming the Hindu society. He said the evils are so rampant. He did talk about widow remarriage, he talked about girls' education. But when you read his writings, you find he is very skeptical about doing something to the Hindu society. His disciple, Keshav Chandra Sen, so Raja Ram Mohan Roy doesn't say it, but suggests that maybe Hinduism should adapt itself to a religion like Christianity. Modern, rational, and rid of all these things. Keshav Chandra Sen, his follower, said, no, we don't have to all change our religion, but we bring a Christian theology into the Hindu framework. Christian theology. And you know that when Keshav Chandra Sen, in the last years of his life, he was repeatedly told by people to accept Christianity. And he was always on the, indecisive about it. That was Keshav Chandra Sen. So they said, no, we don't have to give up our religion, but we bring Christian theology into Hindu society. And then the third response was Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar said, and they are all people who are born 1820 to 1840, and then they live up to 1890, 1888, So this is the phase of 19th century where the Hindu mind is responding to the challenge, to the Shastric challenge, intellectual challenge. Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar said, we don't have to import any theology. We don't have to change our religion. Hindu society is amenable to reform from within. From within. And he is responsible for the passage of Hindu Widow Remarriage Act 15th in, I think, 1856. 1856 or 65, one of these two dates. And he arranged with his own funds marriage of 1,000 widows. And above all, he had only one child, a son. And he married that son to a widow. Remarkable man. This is third. Fourth response was Dayanand Saraswati. Dayanand from Gujarat. He said, we don't have to do anything. Our society is capable of reform. Not only that, those who are blaming us, their own system needs to be reformed. So he carried the battle to the other camp. I think original of Rajiv Malhotraji's Whiteness Studies. That you carry the battle, and he wrote a book, Satyarth Prakash, which had a critique of the Bible, the Quran, and what later on proved counterproductive, a critique of Guru Granth Sahib also. Guru Granth Sahib. That is a little out of it, I won't come to that immediately. So that was the so. And he set up Arya Samaj. See, Dayanand Saraswati set up Arya Samaj. Arya Samaj then started girls' education. And it is very interesting that the first girls' school in UK was started in 1925. But the first girls' school in India was started in 1919. 1919.
1890.
Girls' school first. 19. No. 1919. 1919. Yes, because Banaras Hindu University came about 1925. And then others have said. The university I am associated with, there an Arya Samaji opened a Kanya Gurukul in 1936. And that was the fifth school, girls' school. So girls' education started. This is how they reform. Then next, it is at this stage, that Vivekananda comes in and handles this question of social problems. He carries forward Dayanandji's argument, Samvidhana's argument. Girls' education, equality of women, and he also accepted that there is ill treatment of caste and all that. All that he accepted, but he went beyond, and he questioned the attack on idolatry, questioned the attack on Murti Puja. Idolatry doesn't convey, because Murti Puja for me has a whole structure, but idolatry doesn't have that structure. So Murti Puja, he, not to go into many details, he took a simple argument. Nirakar Nirguna, Sakar Sagun. The Hindu thought system permits you to have a formless, attributeless God, or a God with form and God with attributes. And quite similar to Spinoza's argument in interpreting the scriptures. He said that the idea as idea and idea as symbol, idea as image, both are welcome, both are the same. And his defense proceeded along this logic. Now, I'm not going to details because that's not my purpose today, how he carries out the argument. What I want to say, this is his defense. Now, in that defense, in being a defender of Shastra, countering the Shastra with a counter Shastra, a counter thought, he is in the line, a long line of Indian thinkers. That's what I today want to share, because I don't think many of us are aware that India has, being one of the oldest civilizations that have survived, it has had a number of times it has happened in India that the knowledge has been lost, it has been suppressed, marginalized, but then it has been recovered. It has been recovered. The whole notion of Vyas Parampara, Veda Vyas is, according to one serious thinking, Vyas is a parampara. Vyas was not an individual. The Vyas parampara is all about reconstituting the knowledge and text. And Ved Vyas was the 27th Vyasa. 27th. Now, I will not go right back to Saraswati river and Rishi Markandeya, but I'll take the familiar period. The first such defender that we know, because the book exists, was Yaska. Yaska, 9th century BC, he faced the challenge because this defense, Raksha, defense of Shastra has a structure. Structure is there is a challenge, there is a response, and there is the thinker who responds. So there are three elements in this: the challenge, the response, and the thinker who responds. His background, what all he does. Then what kind of response? How many forms of response? That will come in this. So Yask, 9th century BC, materialist skeptics questioned the value of Vedas. The materialist skeptics like Kautsa said, Ved mantra nirarthak hai. All these mantras are meaningless. He must have found someone sitting down and reading, and he must have asked, what are you doing? I'm trying to understand this mantra. He said, you are a vain pursuit, because these mantras have no meaning. They are meaningless. They are rhapsodies of the knaves. They are created by Brahmins for their livelihood. So Marxists are not only recent. India has had its share long time back. This is almost 3,000 years back, that this is all meaningless. These are all meaningless mantras. Then Yask, Nagar Parkar, Gujarat ka se, Yaska took it upon himself to show that the Vedic mantras are not meaningless, that you have to read them in a particular way, you have to interpret them. And his classic position, no linguistic utterance is meaningless. You see, much later, we have Wittgenstein, we have others saying, no linguistic statement is meaningless. Even Chomsky's green ideas sleep furiously. If a child speaks them, or a poet or a madman, they have a lot of meaning. So no linguistic statement is meaningless. From that so he developed a whole Shastra, a whole Granth. He wrote a Granth, he wrote a treatise, he created a Shastra of interpretation, and he developed a Paddhati, methodology of interpretation. How you interpret a text. And his work culminated in Mimamsa. Mimamsa is a philosophy of interpretation and all that. So that was the first one. So what did he do? How did he respond? The challenge was that the text you consider not sacred. Vedas are not sacred for Hindus. We don't have sacred texts, sacred books. They are important, culturally important, societally important. They are central to our society because the society looks upon these as knowledge texts. Knowledge texts. I have taken care even in the Encyclopedia of Hinduism or whenever I write, I never use the word sacred because they are not sacred. You can tear the Vedas, you can burn them, you can abuse them day in and day out. Nobody will do anything. Nobody will say anything. It can't be done in certain other systems. But with Hindus, no, they are not sacred. Because, you see, although we say Shruti and Samriti and Kavya and direct perception and all that, but we do not deny, although some scholars, even Cambridge scholars, translate Shruti as Vedas as divine text. Now, divine is the wrong word to use for the Hindu structure of thought. There is no divine text. There is no divine knowledge. But there are extraordinary people who had direct apperception. You see, they were alaukik pratyaksha, extraordinary perception. The yogi pratyaksha, like Mahatma Buddha sitting under a tree and getting enlightenment, not following any given epistemology to acquire a certain kind of knowledge. So the Vedas are knowledge texts, and they were considered important. So every time the Vedas, it's a good thing that the Vedas were abused right from the beginning, because then great minds rose to defend them, and in the process, the texts remained alive, and the thread of comprehension of those esoteric texts, because Vedas are composed in what is called Sandhya Bhasha, twilight language. They are, in the Jaimini himself says, the Ved Bhasha is Rupaka, metaphor. The whole language is metaphorical. So they are esoteric texts. But it's good that people abuse them, because then great minds like Yaska, they rose to explain what meaning they have. I don't have time to give you some examples, very interesting examples of how Yask resolved some of the problems of Kautsa in why he said they are meaningless. So, challenge is meaninglessness of charge of meaninglessness levied against a knowledge text which is held important by this society. The responder is in modern words, linguist. We didn't have linguists. We only had rishis and manishis and chintakas So he was a manishi, a person who worked deeply with his mind. And he responded a systematic. He created a treatise, grantha. He created a methodology. That was his response. So intellectual challenge, intellectual response. And that kind of question was never raised again in the tradition. Second example I will take is of Adi Shankara. We have had surfeit of Adi Shankara in the last day and a half. But Adi Shankara is a giant, and I think you can never have enough of him. Now, I have my own perception, understanding of Adi Shankara. You see, what was the challenge? The challenge was, again, broadly Buddhism. Okay? Buddhism was the challenge, and people all over the country, they were beginning to lose faith. And in the Sanatan Dharma, we know that from Ujjain, Brahmins migrated to Sthaneshwara, Harshvardhan's rule, because the Brahmins said, we are suffocated by the Buddhist environment. So, Adi Shankara, 7-year-old boy, his mother packed a little rice, so took his stick and walked out of that Kerala village. There were no Air India, there were no airlines, there was no UGC, University Grants Commission, no project funds. And he went around the country. He responded to that challenge to Dharma. What did he do? His response, Adi Shankara's response, is richer than Yaska's, because the situation required that his response should be deeper. He created Shastras in response. What were the Shastras? He reinterpreted, re-expounded the Upanishads, for example. He wrote Tika. Tika is not just a general commentary, the technical. In Indian history of ideas, if I want to understand a primary seminal text, I have to read the Tikas also. Otherwise, say Ashtadhyayi, then all the commentaries that are there. Simply Ashtadhyayi will not give me the knowledge of the discipline of grammar. So he composed Tikas, and 10 or 9 Upanishads, then Gita, then Brahma Sutra, and India's one of the largest book exports even today are Shankara's commentaries, not books by Kapil Kapoor. Nobody reads them anywhere. Their largest book exports are Shankara's commentaries. So he composed those texts, and pravachanas, popular pravachanas. In fact, the popular pravachanas, expositions, as a sannyasin, he was not supposed to stay in a particular place for more than 3 days. So they were always on the move. And wherever they went, they would not go into the human habitations. They will not go inside the village. They will stay outside. Then the villagers will come. They do even today. Even today this happens. They'll come and they'll fold their hands and request them to do something for them, and they know what they needed. They'll bring fruits and other things. In the evening, they will all sit down. They will have some questions, and the teacher, he will explain. According to the Shankaracharya of Sringeri, Parisri, he explained to us that Shankara's commentaries originated in the popular discourses he gave to the villagers. So that was the origin of those Upanishads and commentaries. So he composed the commentaries. He gave many pravachanas. By the way, Katha Pravachan Parampara, Katha Pravachan method, that is narrating and expounding publicly to a large number of people, that is still a common practice with us. And if you are in Delhi and open the television in the morning, you will have a Murari Bapu narrating the Ram Katha. You will have some other person explaining Katha Upanishad. And millions of people, therefore, in India, millions of Hindus know Ramayana, know Mahabharata, and the intellectual vocabulary of Hindu thought is part of the ordinary vocabulary of people. You will not be surprised if a Muslim mechanic, will speak to you the language of Bhagavad Gita. And he is an illiterate man. For example, with me it happened. I had an old car. I used to take it to him. One day he told me, "Ab isko chala do. Now you give it away." Because jiski paid hoti hai, uska khatma hota hai. Whatever is born has to die. I thought he didn't know that he was speaking Bhagavad Gita to me. So ordinary people, the thought, that's why, you see, in one of my papers, writings, I have said that knowledge in India has always been democratic, because there can be nothing more democratic than the oral tradition, where the receiver needs only ears. And God has given you eyelids, but he hasn't given earlids. So you have to listen. So you listen and learn. That is the largest widespread system of knowledge transmission. Shankara's exposition, pravachanas, and then vada. Third was vada, disputation. He disputed with the well-known Buddhist scholars. Most of you all know Mandan Mishra and the debate with Mandan Mishra and all that. Vada. And fourth, institutions. He set up institutions. So you see, the responses to the challenge are along three lines: thought, reform, and institutions. The thought response takes many forms: creation of a shastra, composition of a tika, or general pravachanas to people. There are forms that the thought response will take. And then institutions. Adi Shankara established 10 mathas, the Naga sannyasis. Jaduna Sarkar has a book, A Short History of Naga Sannyasis. These were, I should not give, it is not a very correct analogy, something like Knights Templars. You see, they were warrior saints. And 10 sets, they are still there. This was 7th century, but every Kumbh Mela they fight with each other for precedence in having a bath in the Ganga. You see, 10 mathas, and then it is said, he established 108 temples. Some of them are still there. For example, if you go to Devaprayaga, where Ganga is formed, Alaknanda Bhagirathi, the temple is to Rama, and Rama is in a standing posture, and the priest is from Kerala, and the prasad is Mysore Pak, the sweet which is made in South India. He brought the priest with him. The Badrinath priests are Nambudhiris from Kerala, still today. So he established temples. He established 10 mathas, nice Templar. He established 4 dhamas on 4 corners of India, places of pilgrimage. And he took the Vishnu Badrinath idol, he took out from the Alaknanda river. the Buddhists had thrown the murti into the river. And he took it out and reinstalled the Badrinath murti, Pran Pratishtha. It is amazing, how that man who lived only 32 years, he did all this. And at the age of 32, I didn't even know how to brush my teeth properly. You see, so many times these places, all that. So institutions, and those institutions are still there. See the enduring value of the work he did. Two names are familiar with all villagers in India, Shankaracharya and Kalidas. You ask any villager, Shankaracharya, he'll say, बहुत ज्ञानी था. इतना they'll tell you, very learned man. And Kalidas, बहुत बड़ा कवि था, poet था. Two names are household names. So, great life, 7th century, until today, his name reverberates in the country. So this was his, and as you know, he put paid to Buddhism. Not really. In fact, Buddhism is not really a different system in the sense that every Indian is a Buddhist now. The basic ideas of Buddhism, they have become ingrained in us for good or bad. Ahimsa, non-violence, although we are among the most violent people. That's why we have had too many people preaching peace also in the country, from Mahatma Buddha downwards. But then this is the second response. Third example is, I think not very many people are familiar. Third example is Guru Gorakhnath. I don't know many people have heard of him. Guru Gorakhnath was perhaps 100 years after Shankara, or less than 100 years. And his name is Gorakhnath, Gorakshanath, the man who protected the cows, Gorakshanath. And there is a town, Gorakhpur, which is the headquarter of the Northeast Railway in India. And there is a Gorakh Mandir there, Gorakhnath Mandir. There is also a warlike, a very martial community whom the British were fond of employing in the army, the Gorkhas. The Gorkhas are Gorakshakas, the protectors of cows. And they were very martial people. They were the followers of Gorakhnath. 8th century. He was born in Punjab, but his work is all over. Gorakhnath, also did 2 or 3 kinds of things. What was his challenge? His challenge was Islam. Islam. By that time, Taxila University had been destroyed. And the initial inroads and invasions had begun. And as it always happens, along with the armies, the sadhus came, the Sufis, the saints came. And the Sufis, they established deras, places in various parts. And they were more instrumental in conversion than the sword of Hindus to Islam. To counter that, Gorakhnath set up his own system of Nath Sampradaya, Nath Yogis. Nath Yogis, very much like the Naga sannyasis, they are also warrior saints. And they have a particular system. For example, they had a blanket, kambal, and they had a kundal. They will wear a kundal. They have a kada, and they have a kamandal. Kamandal is, what the sadhus carry for food. 4 elements, all beginning with a ka. It is interesting because later on Guru Gobind Singh set up the Khalsa and he had 5 symbols. Again with ka. So I am telling you, sir, I am humbly submitting that there was a tradition of defense of dharma, which took various forms: thought, institutions, reform. So Guru Gorakhnath and his Guru Parampara, the word Guru appears for the first time with Gorakhnath. Later on, 10 Sikh Gurus, and then Guru Gobind Singh. But then with Vivekananda's time, the Gurus became Swamis because they were internationalized. And when they were internationalized, the Gurus became Swamis. And it has its own, a little different structure. Gorakhnath ji also composed his Bani. The word Bani, which is used by the Sikhs, Bani. Bani is Vani. Vani is the utterances, the poetic utterances. Poetic utterances. Guru Gorakhnath composed his Bani both in Sanskrit and in the local language, Bhojpuri. This is the first example of vernacularization of knowledge in India. He was followed later by Ramanuj in the south and Hemachandracharya in the west. The vernacularization of knowledge through the local language of the people. So Gorakhnath ji composed his Bani in Sanskrit and also in Bhojpuri. And Gorakhnath is a common name. Even today, when you travel in North India, you have his Nath Jogis deras. Parallel to the Sufi deras, wherever there were Sufi deras, there were a Nath Jogi deras. So when Guru Nanak went on his peregrinations, he would, because Guru Nanak was Pavanhari, he would not eat food. The air was enough for him. But his two followers were human, Mardana and other. So they will tell him after 3 days, Baba, तुम तो पवनहारी हो, हमें तो भूख लगी है, कुछ खाना खिलाओ. Then they will go into the Nath Jogi Dera and then they will eat food there. So interlinking of these traditions. For example, in Rohtak, a town in Haryana, there is a very ancient matha, a Sthal Bohar, Sthal, which dates back to 8th century. And it's a Nath Jogi matha. This there. So he established mathas, and he composed his text, philosophy. He was a great poet. Gorakh Bani. And if you in Delhi, when you're in India, if you turn on the channels, if you're lucky, you may have some person singing the Gorakh ne Bangla gaya. Bangla is bungalow. 10 twar ka bangla. This body is a bungalow with 10 gates. Beach pavan ka khamba. And in the middle, there is a pillar of wind, of air. Pillar of air. Ata jata koi na dekhe, yahi ek achamba. How the life enters, how the life leaves, nobody sees. That is the wonder. A beautiful poetry, singable poetry, oral tradition. The texts were also oral. They are in the oral tradition. The texts are not meant to be read. They are meant to be either heard or heard and seen, shravya prayaksha. So participatory experience of these texts. That's why large number of people got educated into these ideas. So institutional, there's a Nath Sampradaya, then Nath, then Bani, and a whole mythology of being a Nath Yogi, the visible symbols and all that. Even today, you can, if you go to these places, you will find someone and you will recognize that he is a Nath Yogi. He's a Nath Yogi. Then the next one, again very important, Guru Gobind Singh, the Sikh Guru, 10th Guru. What was the challenge to him? The challenge was that of oppression. The oppression of the Mughal rulers on the weak, helpless Hindu population of Punjab. And Guru Gobind Singh was a rare combination. He was a poet, he was a scholar, and he was a saint. And he first tried Shastra, that is knowledge and discourse. But he reached the conclusion it doesn't work. Then he took to Shastra, weapons. Then he took to weapons and he raised Khalsa, what you recognize as Sikhs today. The Khalsa. Khalsa means the pure, the fighters for Dharma. And he asked every Hindu family to donate their elder son for sacrifice, for Dharma. And that is how the Khalsa system started. Guru Gobind Singh also composed his counter text. So he rewrote the epics, Krishna and Rama Avatar, Krishna Avatar, and he wrote in the language of the people, Braj Bhasha. He wrote in the Braj Bhasha. And you can see that his work has endured, not only endured, it has expanded. And one of the strengths of Hinduism today is the Sikh or the Sikhs. Because the Sikh peasantry of Punjab live a life which is closest to the Rig Vedic life. Same pattern of life as that of there. So Guru Gobind Singh. Now in this tradition, we have Vivekananda. You can ask, but Vivekananda, did he read Guru Gobind Singh? Did he read Guru Gorakhnath? First of all, you can't exclude that Vivekananda, a man like Vivekananda with extraordinary pratibha, was not aware of all this. That we cannot say. However, in India, you don't have to be learned in a tradition to be part of the tradition. Because the tradition does not exist in the books. It exists in the air. It exists all around you, all around you. And Vivekananda, of the various systems of response of thought, he did not compose a major treatise. He did not write any major commentary, learned commentary, but he did pravachanas. His lectures are pravachanas. Pravachanas in the mode of Shankaracharya and in the mode of other thinkers. And in those pravachanas, in those lectures, he took up all these questions, one by one, and answered them. And I think inspired the people in a way that they had not been inspired for more than 100 years. As I said, they were waiting for someone to come, someone to give them a voice, because the Hindus had lost their voice. And he gave them the voice. He not only gave voice to the Hindus, he gave voice to Asia, in fact. He was the Asian voice. And in his international concourse, where he went around and he talked. Because 19th century, the time he was born in, was a century of conflict. Conflict between imperial powers, conflict between the colonizers and the colonized, conflict within, among the colonized people, and conflict between religions. Therefore, Vivekananda's argument that for peace we need dialogue, for peace we need understanding. And the first argument for samvada, dialogue now, dialogue is a high frequency word now in the Indian universities, and I'm sure other universities also. Dialogic imagination of Bakhtin and dialogue, and why St. Augustine is not dialogic, Plato is dialogic, and so on and so on. So asking for a dialogue among people, dialogue among religions, interfaith dialogues. We have several efforts at interfaith dialogues, but as we are all aware, interfaith dialogues do not succeed, generally. Because if the ontologies remain intact, the dialogue cannot take place. But if the ontologies are modified, then perhaps. And moreover, you see, we human beings are among the most violent animals. And I think we indulge in words before we fight. It's like, Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, where the reluctant Brutus leads an army against Caesar. And when Mark Antony's army he meets, then he says that, Brutus says, Antony, let's first talk. And Antony says, words before blows. So the words before blows. To some extent, the effort, this is a kind of the effort at dialogues and others is a kind of luxury, by which we hope, first of all, we find employment for ourselves, and also, secondly, we hope that we can postpone the apocalypse, if it is to come, that maybe we can postpone it for some time. So, Guruji came, Vivekananda came in that tradition. But his differences are there. You see, his contribution will not be as enduring, as long-lasting as that of Adi Shankara and others. Because for that you have to create a Shastra. And you have to create a system which works among the masses, popular people, institutions. Unless they are there, the work does not, it doesn't bring about a radical transformation in the mind. But for the moment, he created a transformation. And for some time, you see, for the moment at least, the Hindus developed some self-respect. And they felt that here was someone defending them. Also, he is today in India, he is a voice that our young educated Indians can identify with. Our young educated Indians cannot identify with Shankaracharya. Because we are, educated in India means what? Anand Kumara Swami at one point says educated Indians. Then he gives a footnote. This is how the victims of Indian education are described. You see, educated Indians. So the young educated Indians cannot identify with Shankaracharya, but they are able to identify with, it's all because of the language in which he worked. That language distances him from ordinary people, what he said. But it puts him close to some of the young, new generation who are educated in that tradition. And secondly, Vivekananda is a middle class revolutionary, in the sense that his appeal to large extent is to the middle classes, educated people. And Swamiji, even the Matha is open to a certain class of people. You see, an uneducated peasant cannot walk into your system, but an ordinary uneducated farmer can become a Nath Yogi. He can become a Nath Yogi. And because the language is his language, everything is his language, his structure. So this is my understanding. He belongs to a great tradition, and he has his own place and contribution historically in our history. And I think to that extent we are all very grateful, and we are grateful that India produces such people off and on. Thank you very much.
I have to say that when Dr. Kapoor talks, he takes us on a journey. And it's a visual and ethereal and tragicomic journey, and like no other. So it's a unique experience. Thank you so much, Professor Kapoor.